Welcome to the AutosportRadio.com 2023 show. I'm your host, Andretti. We are coming to you from Green Street of Eatery, 911 North Green Street, which is also State Road 667 in Brownsburg. Tonight's show is presented by the Indy Dental Group. Dr. Jack Miller, 500 veteran, and his wife, Dr. Liz Lewis, have a spectacular practice. They take care of any of your dental needs. Great people, great service. They got 5 offices. Need an appointment. Just give them a call. Number 317-846-6125. Need insurance? Car, your home? Got a question about insurance? What I did like call BP Insurance, located at 5004 West 16th Street at Speedway. Call Mike or Tom, call them Tom. The number is 317-248-0070. SDRA, Sports Car Weekends Racing Association. At Green Road, now got the F3 and F4 sports car, SCCA, as well as the Trans Am. Check them out, go to SDRA.com and look at it, look at their schedule. If you got an event anywhere near you, highly recommend it. Go see it. Great event. Trans Am is bigger now than it was back in the day. Want to get a chance to see some good vintage cars, sports car racing, SDRA.com. Check out the schedule. Anybody looking for tickets for this year's 500? We have 6. Paddock, section S28, rows E, G, and H, seats 14, 15, and 16 front to back. Know anybody? If you're looking for anything to hold, $135 and license fixed. I got some good seats. Right down to the sports car finish line. Underneath the overpass, and it's sunny and hot. My first guest tonight is a gentleman who has a name that if you've been following any kind of open wheel racing, you've heard of. Of course, Byrd Racing is the name. Started out by Jonathan Byrd, who was one of the first Colonel Sanders Kentucky Fried Chicken franchisees, and he built a cafeteria in Greenwood, and when he did, people said, "You've got to be kidding." Well, when he got done with it, he said to them, "I wasn't kidding. He's done well." Now he has a grandson who is racing, has done very well for himself. He's my first guest, and we just get bonded sitting here talking. Nathan Byrd, and welcome to Autosport Radio.
Thank you for having me on.
Now, coming from the blood that you have from your grandfather, your dad and your uncle have been involved in the sport for all their lives as well. Mm-hmm. It was obvious that at some point in time you put a helmet on instead of a glove and grab a steering wheel other than a street car and would race.
Yeah, to me, it actually wasn't very obvious. I mean, maybe my dad had some inkling in his mind for who knows how many years. He had some sort of an idea, yeah, maybe Nathan could be a race car driver. But for me personally, I always just focus on school, high school sports, cheer, football, soccer, track, doing all those different things. And this, the idea of me racing had never ever come up in my brain. Never really came up in conversation between me and my dad until finally when I graduated high school. That summer, we were spending a couple days here in Indiana doing some go-karting at Speedway indoor karting, like Sarah Fisher's place. And we went one day, we had a blast, had a good time. He was like, "Hey, you want to go again?" I was like, "Of course I want to go again, that was fun." I was like, "Okay," boom, next day. And then at the lunch place there, he proposed the idea of racing to me, which was he laid out a 6-year plan that would involve me going from go-karts to the Indy 500, and with all the steps in between, all the Formula Car developmental steps. And I was took me I thought about it for a moment and just thinking about well, how would it work, do this and that, and we just talked about it, and then I decided that I would be dumb if I didn't take him up on the opportunity, and so I decided to do just that. And then 3 weeks later, I was in my first go-kart race back in Arizona, where I lived up until October of last year. So, boom, he proposed the plan. 3 weeks later, first go-kart race, and then from there, the rest is history. I'm about 5 years into that plan, 4.5 years right now.
Now you've been behind the wheel of different cars. You're driving something all the time. In fact, you're leaving tomorrow to go down to Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, to Sebring actually,
Sebring,
and
yeah.
I just raced at Road Atlanta the 2 weekends ago, and yeah, so I mean that's the whole point of my developmental path. Originally the plan wasn't what it is now, and it was much more straightforward: go-karts, Lucas Oil Formula Car Series, and then just go up through the road to Indy, and then eventually you'd be able to be qualified to run a Formula Car, an IndyCar, in the Indy 500, and like during my 2020 Lucas Oil Formula Car Series year, my dad had this idea like, well, I mean, we're not really doing that much racing. It's kind of like there's very few weekends where we're actually doing stuff, and I feel like we could do this little focus midget thing that's happening in there's a race in Arizona. We can do that, some racing elsewhere, and so we explored some focus midget racing and just started dabbling in some other disciplines besides just formula cars. And from there, we kind of just 2021 came along, and then we ended up going from 3 different disciplines of racing in 2020 to 12 different disciplines in 2021 across pro, late model, and modified, and multiple different formula cars, some touring cars, and that's really what springboarded my diversity as a race car driver and what I would consider one of my strengths, which is my ability to adapt back and forth between different race cars. So, and 2022 was another year where we did 15 different disciplines and 108 races. And this year is going to be a little less. We're going to draw it back a little bit in terms of the disciplines, about 10 different disciplines, but we're boosting up the numbers to about 160 plus races this year.
100 and some.
Yeah, that's confirmed on the schedule as of right now. It could be more potentially, but yeah, 160 plus confirmed.
Let me guess, your dad can't call you up and say, I need your help at the hotel.
No, I was actually for a few years, during some of my high school years, even when I was working in college, doing the go-kart in college, helping out and actually working the front desk at the hotels. And I was doing that for a while, but eventually the racing career path called stronger, and that's what sort of prompted the move. And it just makes sense to be in Indiana for my short track racing endeavors and just being here, which is where Indy is. And it just made sense to sort of make that official jump, which is why we decided it was probably a good idea for me to move to Indiana and just be here more involved in the motorsports world.
So what are you going to be driving from here? Are you going to be in USAC? Are you going to run sprint cars, midgets, Silver Crown, as well as 17 other disciplines?
Yeah, that's it's actually really exciting what we're planning on doing this year. We're currently looking at 10 different disciplines. It's going to involve running a midget, and we always prioritize short track racing, especially pavement racing at IRP, and running the midget there and the Silver Crown car. We were able to do that last year, and we're planning on doing it again this year. And it's always pretty much set in stone every single time. Whatever dates are at IRP, we're there. We're running the midget. We're running the Silver Crown car. Last year we also ran the sprint car, and if someone's listening or in this room that is connected with a potential sprint car seat, that's something that we're interested in, because that's the only race we don't have on the calendar for October's IRP race is the 500 Sprint Car Tour sprint car race. So, but besides that, we're running all but one of the Silver Crown races with Davey Hamilton Racing.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and definitely the 3 at IRP, we're going to do that, starting with the April one at IRP, and we're running all the midget races with Bertrand Motorsports, and that's going to be very, very. That's just always locked in stone. So that's the short track side, as well as we're doing super modified racing in the Northeast with Mike Muldoon, and as well as with Hayward Motorsports, we're going to be doing some 410 sprint car racing on dirt. So, and that's just sort of scratching the surface in terms of the pure racing. This year as well, we're going to be, this weekend I'm going to be racing a Porsche 911 GT3 Cup car in 3 different classes at Sebring International Raceway, as well as a Formula car that we imported from Australia, which is a 600 horsepower V8 Formula car, which runs in the Australian S5000 series. People consider it like the Australian IndyCar, we shipped that over here so I could run it in SVRA Group 9, just get a bunch of seat time, bunch of races in, and really shore up my Formula Car development so I can be prepared for Indy. And so we're going to be running the Porsche for like 65 races this year, the new Formula Car, the AF01, for 55 races or something like that this year, and just probably, with my calendar, being the busiest race car driver in the entire world in terms of days in a race car, the miles that we're planning on running in race cars, and total races as well. So it's going to be pretty exciting.
Do you like living out of a suitcase?
I mean, honestly, this has been, so far this year, been pretty relaxed. I've had like race weekend and then off weekend and then race weekend. And last year it was just almost every single race weekend was a race weekend. So it's actually been a little bit more relaxed, but once April hits, it's pretty much race every single weekend, whether it's a short track race here in Indiana or we're flying out to some road course, some circuit to race in the Porsche, the AF01, BMW M4. We're planning on running in some endurance rounds and some endurance racing as well. So doing a lot of racing, getting a lot of seat time, and yeah, pretty much. I'm lucky that I can just sleep on airplanes because that's what I usually do. But I'm trying to work in some reading, just trying to just always be on the path. So.
What was your degree from college?
I got a Bachelor of Science in Business Management. That was my major, and then my minor, I got a minor in accounting. So currently not using either of those majors, but it's always a nice thing. I was considering like, man, do I really want to finish out this college degree? It's like I have this racing thing that's going on, and I'm pretty sure that's just going to be the future. Like in my mind, it's like that's just what's going to happen. And everyone, like my nana, my dad, like I've already invested this much money, myself as well. As like, yeah, you probably should just finish out college, just get it done and over with. And once it was done, I kind of haven't looked back. So.
Well, at least when you get to the big time, you'll be able to keep track of your own accounting.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you know how to do it. And
help my dad manage all that. Yeah.
I trust with all this stuff you're doing, you've got sponsors behind you somewhere besides the Byrd Racing family.
Yeah, and yeah, obviously Byrd Racing, Mike Grams, is instrumental in this even being possible in the first place. One of the things that my dad is really helpful in, and also our vice president that we brought onto the team for Byrd Racing, Chris and Teehee, they work together to essentially use the assets of our family business to bring in partners that we can not just, hey, can you write us a check for X amount of dollars? It's actually creating a sustainable long-term partnership that we can ask them, hey, can we just write you a smaller check? And we're going to do business with you anyways, and when we are able to write them a smaller check, we can reallocate that money over to the racing budget that we have set for the year. So organizations like Tilson, the HR company that we use, Hope Givers International, that's a charity that we've been working with for quite some time now. Sonesta Hotels, one of the organizations that we franchise one of their brands from, Red Lion Hotels, and Kipsu, we use their software system to help with our front desk management. FMX, there's a whole bunch of partners that we use that we're lucky to have on board that are passionate about what we're doing, and yeah, I'd probably say they're the good ones.
It's amazing what your grandfather was one of the first Colonel Sanders talked into driving up and down the highway looking for people to get into business. And look what happened with what he started and what it's come to today for your dad and your uncle, I call him JB too, what it's developed into. It's amazing. And in my mind, and just hearing now what you're doing makes all the sense in the world. You gotta, because even when you're in IndyCar, things happen that you don't expect. Like you can run a 500-mile race down in Daytona, you have to run 550 miles to win the damn thing. So stuff happens, and if you've got all that experience, you've got something will register in your brain. Oop, that's a good idea. I think, how long do you think that you're looking to try and qualify for the 500?
So currently, like I said, we're kind of we're heading into the 5th year. I think because I started, my first race car race was in 2020, February, and 2023. So yeah, we're in the 5th year of my development as a race car driver from starting in go-karts, which is pretty late, starting at 18. like guys are starting when they're 5 years old, barely like they're in kindergarten and they're racing go-karts against each other. It's kind of crazy. But I started when I was 18, so I had to really get a jump on, or sort of get on an exponential developmental path to really catch up. And so I'm in that 5th year, the 6-year plan, and the hope is that by next year's Indy 500, that's when we would hopefully be able to make an entry. And if that's not possible, like, it is what it is. We always have 2025 and 2026, and as long as something like that's always going to be our goal, and that's what we're going to keep on striving for. But yeah, sometime in the next couple of years is when we plan on making that Indy 500 debut.
As we were mentioning, it's amazing. Some of the drivers even now, this year, that are in cars, you went, where do these guys find them? The owners of the teams keep their eyes on. They got people that are looking. So you can bet your bippy that somebody from IndyCar has been following what you're doing.
Yeah, that would be very interesting if that, like, just thinking about that. My main priority, it doesn't matter who's looking, is, and that's always been our priority in my development as a race car driver, is to get the seat time. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the biggest series, the most renowned, against the most renowned competition. For us, it's about getting as much seat time as possible for the lowest budget possible. That way we're maximizing the value that we're getting out of our racing, and that's how I'm able to do as much racing as I am and do more racing than everyone else. Like say in some generic Formula Car series, I'm doing more racing than all of them combined, and that definitely does something for my development as a race car driver, and that's why I think hopefully by next year, the next couple of years, I'll be able to not only be a competent driver for the Indy 500, but also a competent driver across all these other different disciplines, short track racing, and super modified racing, and sports car, touring car racing, and all these different disciplines. I want to be that guy that can actually do anything, like race anything, anytime, anywhere. And a lot of guys say that, but I want to be the guy that can say that, actually does that, exactly, and do that, say that, and be competitive, and not just a also ran sort of guy. And that's sort of my personal goal, and the first step of doing that is make it Indy. So
If you're going to drive a car for Davey Hamilton,
yep, the Silver Crown.
you have to compete against his son.
Yeah, actually, I competed. He was my teammate for last year, and we competed against each other. We almost always ran like neck and neck, just like with each other the whole entire time. He's a really good racer, and yeah, I was like racing against Cody Swanson and like Bobby Santos just the very last race at IRP. And I have to mention Kasey when we're talking about IRP, because he's done such a great job in bringing back pavement racing, especially on the midget side, and really revitalizing it. And without him, I don't know where we'd be at in terms of a short track pavement community as racers. So Kasey definitely deserves a lot of praise for what he's done and continues to do. And it's really exciting to be able to run the midget at IRP and sort of fulfill the family legacy on the short track side of things that running with Rich Vogler and Bryan Clauson and those legends. Being able to do that myself and run competitively like I did last year was definitely a blessing. So,
Do you know who the guest is following you?
Say that again.
Do you know who the guest is that's going to follow you?
No, I don't.
Kasey Kohler.
Okay.
He's supposed to be here any minute.
Yeah.
supposedly.
Okay.
So
That's awesome.
I won't tell him you said anything nice about him. But I think it's kind of interesting that even when Lucas Oil came on board, Lucas Oil Raceway Park, everybody still called it IRP.
Yeah, like it was
So
like
they
Lucas Oil
contacted-
Raceway Park. Yeah.
So they contacted Brandon Bernstein, who was a marketing guy for Lucas Oil, and said, how about if we put IRP back? And he said, okay. Lucas Oil Indianapolis Raceway
Yep,
Park is what
yep.
it is now. So everybody can be calling it IRP, which they did anyway. So it's kind of worked out. And he
Yeah,
has
it's all
a-
come full circle now.
Yeah,
It makes everyone's lives easier.
And he has really revitalized that place, brought it back big time, so it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
You know, I got to think that your grandfather is up looking down saying, way to go, kid.
Yeah.
Your uncle, JB2, is, I think, president of the Speedrome.
Yep.
Do you run midgets out there? You know, they do run midgets there.
I actually did run a Kenyan midget race at the Speedrome, and I was like, well, this is kind of awesome. And I haven't been back there since, but yeah. But I was able to run the Speedrome once. And maybe one day I'll be able to run the super late model figure 8 race. That would be kind of awesome.
What, he won't let you run there?
No, we got to get our ducks in order first, but yeah, maybe eventually. That's something on my dad's bucket list for sure, is me running in a figure 8.
Really? Mm-hmm. You know, some of those cars, I went to a place in New York when I first started this, where they had that big world famous figure 8 race. And I think even here at Speedrome, some of those cars are $30,000, $40,000 cars.
Yeah. They're
And
kind
you
of
watch
crazy.
them, how they run, they say, how in the world? I'd have hit somebody in the second lap without question, or somebody to hit me.
Yeah, I'm going to need some practice before I tackle that one.
It's quite a thing. But the racing is in your family blood. Like I say, your uncle is the president of the Speedrome, I believe, and he's also got a speed track, a racetrack that he is promoting and doing well with. So,
Yeah.
does your grandma ever go to any of the races at all, anywhere?
Yeah, my grams, now that I'm living with her in Indiana, she's able to, and I have a good amount of races here in the first place, especially with all the dirt track racing I'm going to be doing now. It's going to be, I think she's able to go to some of the races. Sometimes she can't make it, but yeah, she's been able to go to some of my races, and I really like that.
Yeah, she's a nice lady. Oh,
Yeah.
She's a very nice lady. Fun, and I enjoyed your grandpa. It just amazed me when you go out to the cafeteria when he had it, and you think, God, this is a big business. But then you go to a racetrack at night, and there he is. What are you doing here? He said, I love it.
Yeah.
I sponsored cars, I found out, obviously, and he was a partner of Dick Simon for a couple of years at the Speedway with IndyCars. And one thing that we loved, especially at the Speedway, is he brought hospitality.
Yep.
And it was, if you weren't supposed to be there, they wouldn't let you in because people lined up to, Jonathan Byrd.
Yeah, Jonathan Byrd's fried chicken.
Yeah,
Yep.
gotta get it. Well, you know, I think it's very interesting what you're doing, how you're doing it. I think your dad's going about it the right way. Keep you busy, and get all the experience, because you never know where you are, when you are. Something happens that you recognize what's
Yeah.
going on. It doesn't matter what kind of car it is. Somebody slips, you see it.
Yeah,
You see
exactly.
the opportunity to get around him. If you watch somebody like Mr. Sato, when he's racing cars, if you make a little slip, he's there.
Yeah.
If he has to go in the dirt, he's still going to try and finish.
Yeah, exactly. And I was actually thinking about him today, and yeah, just the amount of racing that I'm able to do, that God's blessed me with the opportunity to do, is just like crazy. And I'm getting all this experience in this in the moment racecraft decision making that I wouldn't be able to, like, maybe you can do some simulator racing and get some laps that way, but really being able to do it in the moment, like fly by the seat of your pants, it's definitely an irreplaceable sort of experience. And that's what I'm hoping to, that's why we're doing what we're doing, to be really, and maybe like really prepared to tackle Indy, and that's what I'm looking forward to doing. I like the way that we're doing it. We're doing it in an interesting way, that sort of bringing it back to the ways that guys used to be, literally like hopping in one car and then drive, like flying to another race, like what we did with John Andretti. So doing that, sort of bringing back that mentality of really like doing everything and not just specializing, doing one particular thing, is what I'm really passionate about as well.
Besides that, since you're busy all the time, you don't have to get a job.
Exactly. This is my job, which is not many people are able to say that. So
It's too bad that you're leaving town, because I just found out that tomorrow night at 6 o'clock at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum, Takuma Sato was going to be the guest there.
Oh.
So you could quiz him and find out some of his secrets.
Oh yes, his speed secrets.
You're going to be down south in the warm air and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Nonsense.
Oh, yeah.
Well, listen, I appreciate you taking the time to come here. I've been watching what you're doing, and it's quite impressive in my mind. And every time something comes up that you've done, you're in a different car. I thought, good Lord,
Yeah,
what
that's
is
the
going
idea.
on? But it seems to be working for you. You're not limping, so far you're doing good. We wish you nothing but the best. And starting this coming weekend, keep an eye on what you're up to.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, and thanks for having me on, and thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah, welcome back, and we'll have you back. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And tell your grandma I said, well, she won't know who I am.
No, she knows. I'll tell her.
I have another guest. We were just talking about him. So if you're through, you can go home and rest, take a nap,
Yeah.
get ready to leave tomorrow.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
My next guest is a gentleman that has been involved in motorsports almost all of his working life. He worked for IndyCar. He was in marketing. He was the vice president of the marketing department at one time. He went out for some unknown reason, went to Granada, California to work for NHRA, I think is what it's called. And he is now a vice president NHRA and general manager of what is now known once again as IRP. Please welcome Mr. Kasey Kohler.
Thank you.
Mason was just complimenting you before you got here on what you have been able to do with IRP. Speeding it up, cleaning it up, bringing it back to life again, running midgets there, which midgets went away, we're running dirt. Now they're back running pavement, and it's your pavement.
Right, yeah. Well, I appreciate the kind words, but and those of you that are from the central Indiana area, IRP 60 plus years, and it's gone through its phases. Some good, some bad, maybe some there were some ugly days there, right? Not a lot of care and attention, and it was, for the most part, it was kind of how do we get through to today and maybe open the gates tomorrow. And I've been there for 6 years now. We've got a really good team of people that have a passion for the facility, a passion for doing it the right way. And we are still crawling. We are not where we want to be. So don't think that what you see today is where we want to be in 5 years. We haven't arrived, but part of that is that oval. That oval track and oval racing has always been part of my kind of DNA. As you mentioned, working for IndyCar and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for 10 years, open wheel racing has been important to me. And when I got there, that oval track, we opened it 4 times a year, and it was if you wanted to rent the facility, right? So anybody could come off the street, say, I'm going to rent the facility, I'm going to put an event on. It could be good, it could be bad, it didn't really matter. But the challenge is when somebody comes out there and you come out for a bad event and they don't know who the promoter is, they just know it's IRP. Boy, I went out there for an event and there was nobody there and nobody cared about it, didn't hear about it. And so for us, we about 2 years ago decided, it was during the COVID year, when we decided to do the night before the 500, with the 500 moving to August. We talked to the folks at Anderson Speedway who we're really close with, and they weren't going to move the little 500. So we said, maybe this is our opportunity to do the night before the 500. We'll do it with pavement sprint car racing. And then, oh, by the way, maybe we'll try pavement midgets. As I passed people in the community, they'd always say, you got to bring back pavement midgets. I knew about them, but I didn't know that much about them. And we brought them back, and it was one of those that I said, boy, if we could get 10 cars here, that would be a success. And maybe next year we'll do it again, and maybe we'll have 12 cars. And maybe in 10 years, we might have a full field. And I was really surprised. We had about 24 to 26 cars that first year, and met a lot of really passionate car owners, drivers, people that, pavement midget racing meant a lot to. And I think it kind of opened the door to us to say, hey, let's do this a little more often. And so we're excited where we're at. We're slowly building. We were able to bring NASCAR back last year with the Truck Series and ARCA, but we want to continue to build and make bigger and more successful events.
Well, you had an off-the-wall event, some kind of a crash fest of some sort that drew a huge crowd.
Yeah.
Wow.
So as you think about our facility, at the end of the day, we're a business, and we have to have events, we've got to have people that come through the gates. And so we took on an event 2 years ago called Cletus and Cars. And the gentleman by the name of Cletus T. McFarland, if you go to YouTube, he's got millions of followers. He does a lot of crazy things with cars, and he's got a lot of people that follow him. So we do one day on the drag strip, and then the second day we move it over to the oval, and he runs a Crown Vic race with a bunch of other YouTube influencers, and we pack the place. It's great to see. It's a lot of different people that might not be exposed to the racing that we're used to, but that's okay. They love engines, they like cars, and maybe this is the opportunity to show them a little bit more about what we do.
Now you have behind the main straightaway and the grandstand, there's a pavement that goes 1,000 feet or so.
Yeah.
It's called the drag strip.
Yep.
And you have the world's biggest drag race there every year. What what effect does that have? I mean, drag racing, to me, is a very interesting sport. What always amazed me, and I've talked to drivers about it, you got in the car, you started here, and 3.5 or 4 seconds later, you get out of the car and you're out of breath.
Yeah.
What in the world did you do, run?
Yeah,
I
right.
mean, your feet under the car, it's an amazing event, but spectacular.
11,000 horsepower in one lane, right? So you think about that. It's why our facility continues to exist and hopefully will continue to grow, which is the NHRA, who I work for. We own that facility. We'll continue to own that facility for the long future there. We don't plan on going anywhere. But we want to continue to build on the U.S. Nationals. It is the world's biggest drag race. We had over 1,000 racers this past year. It becomes a city in and of itself. But to watch and see and feel a top fuel dragster or a funny car is, I always say, you have to experience it. TV doesn't do it justice. I can't do it justice. But as you know, you go down Northfield Drive, most of the industry is based right here in Brownsburg, Indiana. So this is truly the home of drag racing now.
What is NHRA's feeling when you go to them and say, here, I want to expand the oval, I want to expand this, or I want to put in new seats, or I want to put up extra grandstands because we're going to have a bigger crowd. Are they for expanding the track and using the facilities more often?
Yeah, they recognize, they bought it in 1979, and they recognize the history that, the road course had, the oval has, and what the drag strip means. And they recognize for us to continue to grow, we can't just be a single event. We can't just be one racetrack. We have to continue to grow. So it's got to make business sense, right? I have to go and sit down and go with the budget and say, here's how this is going to work, and we're not going to do it just to lose money. But they are supportive. They're supportive of motorsports, and they're supportive of growing the facility. The one question I get now, so the question's kind of in order, as I started 6 years ago. When are you bringing pavement midget racing back? When's the oval going to come back? We're getting there, but I think we can at least answer that we've got pavement midget racing back at our track 3 times this year. When's NASCAR coming back? And so, although we'd love to have the Xfinity Series there someday, I think the Truck Series was a good start for us. Great racing, and the ARCA Menard Series as well. And then the third question that we always get, and I do not have an answer yet for this one, which is, when's that road course coming back, right? We have a 2.5-mile road course that has a ton of history. And I think someday we'll have a form of the road course. I don't know that it's going to be a 2.5-mile road course that uses the drag strip and everything that we've got there. But I do believe that, based on where we're at and how tough it is to be able to get over to IMS to use that road course, there is a spot for us on the road course side of it.
And of course, you have to realize the guy who laid out the original plan was Roger Ward.
Yep.
2-time 500 winner.
Yep.
And laid it out, and I can remember the last IndyCar race they had there was quite good.
Yep.
But the track obviously hasn't been used other than to go somewhere to park. But it's still there and can be resurfaced, which today is not a cheap operation at all.
Not only the resurfacing, a lot of safety upgrades.
Yeah.
If you talk to people, especially those that ran karts there, it was probably a little before my time, but I cannot imagine people that were in high-speed shifter karts going around there. And the stories that I hear from people, it blows my mind. But yeah, that surface has seen better days. But you think about the history of, who's raced there, who's won there, right? That was where Mario won his first ever IndyCar race. It was the home of the first ever IndyCar road course event. It was selected to host the Formula One event that ended up getting moved to Watkins Glen. So you talk about the history. There's a lot of history on that road course that most people don't even know.
And I got to compliment you on something. I mean, you have a good staff, obviously, because you can't do it yourself.
That's correct.
You get the credit. Oh, you're like the quarterback. Oh, here's Kasey. But you've got people around you to do it. But people that work there have told me, I said, what the hell does Kasey do? Well, let me tell you, when we go out with him, we're walking around and we're looking at this. If there's something on the ground, he'll bend down and pick it up. Nobody's ever, and several people have been there for a long time. You've never seen that before. So you take what you're doing and want to make it better for the people that come in so they don't have to trip over soda cans and paper bags to get to where they're going.
Right. I mean, I have the same desires that Roger has at 16th and Georgetown, right? I want that place to shine, and we're not there yet, but we're taking steps every day. I always tell our team, if we can make today better than yesterday, we're going to be in a good spot in a couple of years, right, when we look back. And I feel like we've made some strides there, but that's what we want to do.
It's very interesting, the facility itself. Now, what in the world is built on your southeast corner? I mean, all of a sudden, there's trucks out there. Did IRP own that property and sell it, or did they never own it to begin with?
We never owned that property. We've got a lot of land there, and we're right now looking at how do we best use that land. Like I would tell anybody, we're not selling an acre. You know, we want to continue to grow the footprint that we have within the land that we have. We've got some development around us, which is a good thing. The town of Brownsburg was very kind to put a new entrance in to our facility that's over off of Ronald Reagan. That will become the new entrance to our facility over time. We're not going to be there probably next year. We're working through a multi-year program right now of, you know, how do we get people in the right spots. You come into our facility, unfortunately, we put a racetrack right down the middle of it, and it's really long, and we don't have a tunnel underneath it, so it's kind of tough to get from one side to the other. But we're working through a long-term plan that we'll be able to use that new entrance, which will be our front door, and then the current entrance that we have off of 136. I'll call it the back door. That will, you know, we'll always have that entrance there, but we're working through it. But we've got some really good neighbors coming into the neighborhood, and they've been very supportive.
You know, the place would look a lot better if you could get those people to the east of you to paint their tanks. I mean, they look like they're rusting and gonna fall down.
I should take a step back. I always said that everybody asks me about when's NASCAR coming and when's the road course coming back. I should say, the question I get more than anything, and I get it from the folks at NASCAR, I get it from anybody that races with us, comes to our, when are those oil tanks getting painted? In fact, the town of Brownsburg sent a very nice letter. It's kind of like when you don't mow your grass, right? You get that letter that says, please mow your grass. They sent the letter that said, please paint your oil tanks. They're still rusting. They haven't been painted yet. But I know that's. We've even looked at if we brought in the tallest of tall pine trees that we could bring along there and run across there just to kind of hide it a little bit. But yes, we're well aware.
I was out there one night, and I forget what the race was. I can't remember what was racing.
Uh-huh.
But I'm sitting up in the press box looking out, and I see this light going. What in the world is that? Well, it was a drone. Somebody had a drone back there. I don't know what they were doing, filming.
Yep.
You know, what was going on. I found kind of interesting. Do you guys have that kind of apparatus that you can film your races while they're going on for publicity purposes?
Yeah. So you think about from the track perspective. No, we work with Flo. Flo does most of our broadcasts. Fox does the Truck Series race. But then from the NHRA side, that piece of it, part of our TV group is actually based in our facility right now. We made an investment about a year and a half ago. So when there's an NHRA broadcast on Fox, there's typically 2 to 3 people that are based at our facility from Friday to Sunday, and they're doing the graphics operations. They might be the producer talking to somebody in the pits, you know. So we've got, and that will continue to grow on our side. So there's actually people that we've even done it with talent, our co-host being based right there. They have that technology, and we'll continue. We own everything, what we call below the line. So everything from a TV perspective, we produce our own broadcast. We give that feed to Fox, but that's done on the NHRA side at our facility every weekend.
You know, I'm surprised you mentioned the Infinity Series. I can remember when the Busch Series used to run there. They had to bring in grandstands all the way around to turn 3 to fill them up. Now, why is it? Because I think, in my opinion, they get more people at IRP to watch that than they do at the Speedway. You go out to the Speedway, you can't see anybody. I mean, there may be 30,000 people there, but that doesn't mean anything.
I will have my politically correct answer.
Of course.
Now,
Of course you will.
I think you talk to a lot of folks that, you know, the Busch Series, the Xfinity Series, they put on great racing there. And who knows what the future brings. You talk about turn 3 and 4. I think what I was told that the biggest crowd, and it still blows my mind because I don't know where you park everybody. I mean, we've got a lot of land, but, you know, I think 45,000 people fit in there for a Busch Series race at one point in time. I remember, you know, I was working at IMS and everybody, all the drivers had to helicopter over, right? You couldn't, you know, the traffic was so bad. But we're actually, so right before we did our last race of the season, we started bringing in a lot of dirt. And people, we have a racer with us that races on the drag strip, and they're working on a big construction project. And they said, hey, you know, we're going to have about 400 truckloads of dirt. Would you guys have an interest? And I'm like, yeah, I would. We'd figure out something for it. And so they started bringing in, they started dumping it right outside of turn 3 and 4, right? We had our last pavement race, which Nathan was part of, and all these racers kept coming over and saying, are you guys putting dirt? And that was right after we had made the announcement about the Hoosier 100 coming over, right? And thinking that we were going to go put all this dirt on our racetrack. And that's what I told them. I told them in the driver's meeting, I started it off and I said, hey, I just want to thank everybody for coming. You don't know this, but this is our final pavement race. All that dirt out there is going to be coming on. You can see some of the draws drop, right? Some of those pavement racers. But what we ended up doing is leveling that whole thing off. With our goal is we want to make that from an RV perspective, that you can pull up there, you can sit up there, you can watch all the racing all weekend long and not have to leave your RV, and just better utilize the facility. So we're in the final stages of finishing that right now.
Well, you're going to put water and sewer lines up for them to hook up for the weekend?
One thing at a time.
I'm sorry. Having owned an RV for many years, that question popped in my mind. Now, there is a big camping facility to the west of you.
Yes.
But Speedway or NHRA does not own that.
We do not own that. Linda Partlow and her husband do, and we're good partners with them. They do a great job of taking care of our customers, and they've done a really nice job with that facility, taking care of it. But yeah, that is separate from us.
Are they the owners of the house that's just west of there with the garage or the barn that now with that big windstorm is really on its way down?
Yes, that is a family member, yes.
Oh, yeah, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I wondered about that. What have you planned for this year? When do you start it, and you know, what kind of events have you got that everybody can say, wow?
Yeah, so you think about I say our season. So my responsibility, since I work for the NHRA, I have at the end of the day, 4 racetracks that kind of fall under my responsibility. So we get ready in really next weekend. We'll be in full force out in Gainesville, Florida. So Gainesville, Florida, the Gator Nationals are in 2 weeks. We're excited. Tony Stewart's going to be racing the Gator Nationals this year in Top Alcohol Dragster. So that facility and that event continues to grow and grow. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary a couple of years ago. So we'll be down there making sure that that's all ready, and then we go a couple weeks later to our newly named In-N-Out Dragway in Pomona. So In-N-Out Burger, big supporters of racing, drag racing. Lindsay, the CEO, the owner, she's got a brand new top dragster or a top sportsman car being built, so they're intimately involved. So we'll be out there, and then we get back to Indianapolis around the 1st of April, where we kick off a lot of our drag racing early April, and then our big event. And I'm sometimes careful of how I say it. We've got the Hoosier 100. I know it's not the Hoosier 100 that was at the State Fairgrounds, but that will be our first oval event of the season. So for us, you know, the Silver Crown Series has been important in our history at IRP, and we've talked for a number of years, in my 6 years of thinking about, could we have a standalone event that's a little bit bigger than what maybe the normal purse, maybe the normal lap count would be from the Silver Crown perspective. And that's where we talked and knew that maybe with the Hoosier 100 probably not coming back, we said, what if we raised our purse, right? We're going to pay $25,000 to win. We've got over $90,000 in the purse. We're doing $5,000 to the best appearing crew. So there's some unique things. We're going to have a flyover. We'll have the pomp and circumstance that comes along with that event. And that's what we've said was we want that event to be celebrated for what the Hoosier 100 was. And you know, not to take away from it, it kind of just became another dirt track race, you know, a couple days before the Indy 500. It was still very important, but I think a lot of the other things that went along with that event, you know, if you think back to when it started, kind of went away. So we're working on it. We know that it's not going to be sold out, but we're going to have a good crowd in year one, and we'll keep building on it.
I think when the word gets out there's 25,000 to win, there'll be people show up to see.
We're close to
You're gonna-
40 cars right now,
Oh, I'm
which
sure.
is great for pavement Silver Crown racing. You know, there were days when we struggled to get 18 cars. We've got a lot of new cars that are coming, and some big names that are looking at participating either this year or even next year, and that kind of at least shows that we're on the right track.
Oh, absolutely. I know a number of teams that had Silver Crown cars, they put them up on the shelf because they wanted to run pavement, there wasn't
It
any.
was right next to their pavement midget,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
This past year you had, as it turned out, I don't know if it was planned that way, but you had all three of the major USAC titles were held and won at IRP.
Yeah, and we're going to do it again this year. We call it Championship Saturday. We'll do it in October. I believe it's October 7th this year. It's a weekend earlier. But we'll have the Silver Crown Series Championship, the 500 Sprint Car Tour that runs the little 500, and then our pavement midgets. So we'll run all three championships in one day.
But it just so happened that the champion was crowned
Yes.
on that day, on all three
Yep.
major series.
Yep.
But what if the guy comes in and wins the Silver Crown race, doesn't win the championship?
Yeah, that happens, right? We had contingency plans for that, right? You get your trophy over there, and you get yours over there.
Yeah, and you get your check here, and he gets what's
Yeah.
left. Do you have trouble raising purse money? I mean, 25,000 to win is a pretty good chunk of money for a one-day event. And what do you get to start?
We're at, what are we, 1,500 to start? So it's a healthy purse
Yeah.
for that category.
Does the CEO of NHRA kick into that, or where do you have sponsors that?
You know, it kind of comes from, we have suites, right? We sell those. We do have sponsorship that helps contribute, and then we sell tickets and pit passes and everything else that makes the business work.
What kind of purse are you paying for midgets now? If you bring them back, and there's a lot of cars are starting to come because
Yep.
they want to run.
Yep.
What kind of purses do you have?
So traditionally, the midgets pay $5,000 to win, but we are doing an event. We're bringing back the Twin 25. So if you think about Steve Lewis, who was a successful midget owner and promoter, did his Twin 25s, and Steve's been a huge support for me and for pavement midget racing, even while he's out in California, watches every race, sends me kind of a critique after each event of what we can continue to improve. But we'll do that again. So, you know, that will pay, we'll have two races. It's August 12th. It's the night after our NASCAR race, but two midget races. So whoever wins that first one will start in the back, and there's a $50,000 bonus on top of that if they can win. Dave Steele did that, which was, you know, that goes down in history as one of the great races of, you know, pavement midget racing. So that's something that, you know, we wanted to have a carrot out there for the pavement midget category.
Strangely enough, I've been in communication of late with Steve. So
Oh,
I wonder
yeah?
what he was doing. I think he said he's got a son that's racing or something.
He does.
He's working with him on that.
Runs for Bryan Herda.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So he's still around. You know, you don't hear about him anymore like you used to. But in fact, he started the big event down
He did PRI.
PRI. That's,
Yep.
Yeah, he started PRI show.
Yep. Yep.
So he's been around in motorsports and done a lot over the years.
Yeah.
What got you interested in motorsports? It seems like when you got out of school, you went right into motorsports jobs.
Yeah.
What sent you there?
I from an early age, you know, my father would bring me. I grew up in a small town in Michigan. You know, 43 kids in my graduating class. You know, small farming community, But every Labor Day weekend, we would come down here for the U.S. Nationals. My dad was a drag racer, did bracket racing, but we'd also come to the time trials at the 500. And honestly, that was more of a hook almost than the NHRA was. And so that's where my passion for probably open wheel racing started. And I knew at an early age that I'm the first to admit, I can barely change my own oil. So from the mechanical side, that's not of interest to me. But I love great races. I love fans, people coming together to watch racing, support racing. And so I kind of knew from an early age that if I wanted to work in motorsports, I either go to Indianapolis or I could go down to North Carolina. And I always said North Carolina always had that other form of racing that was kind of like a 4-letter word to me. But now that we host NASCAR, I love it, and it's great racing. But I knew that, and so that's what took me to Indiana University. I wanted to be close to it, and I had an opportunity when I was down at IU to get an internship at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. At that time, we had Formula One there, and it wasn't doing great. They kind of said, hey, we're going to bring these interns in, and we're going to give you all the people that don't want to buy tickets anymore, and you're going to call them. And whoever sells the most tickets gets a full-time job. And I was fortunate enough that I was able to sell some tickets, and I got my start there and stayed there for 4 years, and then got an opportunity to move across the street over to IndyCar.
You know, what is it about the Indianapolis Motor Speedway that no matter where you go, and mention anybody, you say, oh, I'm from Indiana, the 500. What is it about that place that everybody knows? When I was in Florida, I went and lived in Florida for a number of years, and somebody would say, you're in racing? Yeah. Do you know A.J. Foyt? Yeah. Really? Yeah. I sold a lot of jobs on that, by the way, having been involved in it. And it's amazing how it attracts people. And if you watch the race Sunday, I watched to see how Connor was going to do. They had a pretty good crowd there. Yeah,
they had a great crowd. The one neat fact that we were talking about, we had folks that come out to our facility on Sunday to watch the Daytona 500 on our big screens in our top eliminator club. And the neat thing was, after we've kind of started to revitalize the oval, we had 5 drivers that competed at our track last year that were in that race. So, you know, Kyle Larson, Alex Bowman, Zane Smith from the Truck Series, Eric Jones, William Byron, all raced at our track in some form or fashion, which is kind of a neat little fact. But when you talk about the 500, I think if you asked everybody in here, there's always something that's special and unique to everybody. To me, it was always about, the race was always great, but qualifying was what I loved. Like, who could make it, who could put together something and pursue their dreams of making the field. And that's what I still enjoy that almost as much or even more than the race.
Well, supposedly they'll be bumping this year, but when I first came here in the 60s, to have 80 cars was kind of was kind of a slow year. I mean, they had over 100 on a number of occasions. Now, there was always one car that would never go out. Jim Hurtubise owned it, and in the engine, where the engine would be, was full of beer. Well, I found him real quick.
Yeah.
and we got friendly.
Yeah, I can imagine.
A nice cold beer. But, you know, it's changed completely, as you're aware, and most of the people in here. A lot of the drivers in the 60s, 70s, 80s drove short tracks. Mm-hmm. In the off days, if they weren't at the speedway, they're out running a midget or a sprint car somewhere. That doesn't happen anymore. You see the drivers come in with a briefcase and a bag with their helmet and a driver suit in, and the thought of getting into a sprint car or something, no way. No, you can't do that. I think the last one that I'm aware of that did was Eddie Carpenter, I think.
Yeah.
One of the last to drive sprint cars. And I've asked him on a number of occasions, would you like to do it again? He said, oh yeah, but can't.
I know. I'm a big fan of, I always bang the drum for Cody Swanson, right? I mean, I think a lot of folks would love to see Cody get an opportunity, and hopefully, maybe the stars align someday. But there's a lot of talent at the grassroots level, and that's probably why I almost probably gravitate towards it more than I maybe used to with the IndyCar side of it. There's just so many talented drivers that they don't have the funding to bring to it. That are still getting paid to drive race cars full time and professionally, and that's neat to see. It's a bummer that they can't go further than that, either in stock cars or in IndyCar. But, we'll take it and, be able to showcase it at our facility.
The thing that strikes me as strange, excuse me, with Cody Swanson, he drove a couple of Road to Indy cars, and he won. I think he won his first race.
One at our place, yeah.
Yeah. Where is he now? Still winning what he's driving, but he should be there. And of course, now there's a problem. 2 engine suppliers, not enough engines.
Yeah.
I mean, Able Motorsports wanted to enter a car for this year's 500. They haven't got an engine. They apparently have the car. And apparently the funding, or most of the funding is there, but they don't have an engine. So that's becoming an issue. Hopefully one of these days Roger will solve that problem, which
Right.
everybody thought he would do right away, but it's a little more difficult than I guess originally thought. Well, what you have done, I mean, I knew Mike Lewis and Jeff Dakin prior to came in, but since you come in, you stepped up the program. Perhaps NHRA said, here, we'll give you this and you can build it. I mean, if you don't have any money, you can't do anything. Perhaps you've been able to convince them you know what you're talking about, and they're willing to go along and grow the thing, which is what needs to be done, and hopefully the road course will get involved. I hate to see them use the drag strip as part of it, but,
Yeah.
but nobody's going to ask me about it, so just see what it is. Is there ever a day when you wake up and say, oh, geez, I got to go to the office?
When it's really cold out and we have to do outdoor work right now, we were putting out cones the other day and it was Friday and it was 30-some degrees, and you wish spring was here, right? You wish cars were running down the race course, but no, I'm really lucky. I don't have to ever use the term that you just used, which is work, right? I am fortunate. I will be the first one to admit that I really, I've done a lot of different things, and when I worked in the professional bull riders, things like that, but really, it's not work, right? We get to do some really cool things. We get to put on really neat events. So as long as you enjoy it and you got good people around you, that takes care of a lot of the challenges you normally would have.
Where can somebody find, because you don't advertise on television or radio anymore, where do people go to find your schedule and what's upcoming?
Yeah, so we do, so raceirp.com is the website. Our social handles are all raceirp. We do, for our bigger events, we still use TV and radio, but for the most part, our advertising buying, when our dollars are much more finite, I mean, it's digital, it's social. We were just talking today about our NHRA event in New Hampshire that, we're adjusting how we spend up there, and I mean, no secret, it's becoming much more digital.
And the neat thing about that is, number one is, other than paying the people to do it, it's free, and you expose yourself to thousands of people, because it's amazing the number of people that come on I got 2 Facebook pages. I'm like, good Lord. Yeah. It's amazing how they find you.
Yeah.
But it works, obviously. I can't say enough about what now IRP. How difficult was it when you approached Brandon and say, we need to go back to IRP? How difficult was that?
Well, I mean, I wish I had this really long story. We were sitting in a suite in Atlanta and said, hey, our agreement's coming up in terms of the naming rights of the facility. What if, and we would love to see if we could celebrate the history of IRP, right? Everybody would always, that's what everybody knows it as. I always tell a funny story, because there's a Lucas Oil Speedway out in Wheatland, Missouri. My mom got locked out of her house about 4 years ago, and she calls Lucas Oil Speedway, says, hey, my son works there, I'm locked out of my house. And they said, ma'am, we're not familiar with your son, he doesn't work here. So she thought I was either pulling a fast one. They said, which track are you trying to call? And I said, Lucas Oil Raceway? They said, we're Lucas Oil Speedway, right? So I use that as kind of like a small antidote. But when we talked to and Forrest blessed it, right? He said, no, that it is IRP. We're fortunate that we've been able to keep our name on it, and they're probably one of the, I mean, they are the best partner that you could have on these sorts of things. You don't get too involved on the small things that sometimes you find with partners, that they want to have their fingers on everything. Brandon, Forrest, now Morgan, they know the history of that facility.
And they know what it means to people and so forth. It's kind of interesting. I had Brandon on the program. He had a crash when he was driving top fuel. You're still in open wheel cars, top fuel, and
Yeah, that's right.
I'm still open wheel.
He just didn't turn left, or he wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, not- But I had him on the program at that time, and his dad was still driving it, obviously. But to me, his dad is like John Force. I mean, John Force is drag racing.
Yeah.
You mentioned drag racing, John Force. Now, somebody who's catching it very quickly is Antron Brown.
Yeah.
He is the most approachable guy in the world, the nicest guy you'll ever meet, and he supposedly will be here. But now that he has his own team, he's on the move all the time, everywhere. In fact, I see him on Facebook where he's in lights on him and all this kind of stuff. But he's promoting himself, which is a smart move, and he's always approachable, good guy. But Kenny was, obviously the first one ever to go 300 miles an hour.
Yep.
He had everything going. Does he ever show up anymore?
Yeah, he does. Here's a really funny one small story, not to go too long, but about Kenny Bernstein. If you ever see the highlights about him going 300 miles per hour, right? They show him goes down, and they do the interview afterwards. I can't believe it. I didn't learn this until about 2 years ago. They missed the cut of him doing the interview after he went 300 miles an hour. They had to film that the next day. So he basically makes the pass again the second time, right? Doesn't go 300 miles, but he knew that he had the cameras rolling and they had to capture that because that's what lives on forever, right? It's the 300 miles an hour and then it's the top end interview. And only the folks in this room and anybody watching on that camera know now that we had to capture that the second time.
When I forget who it was that had the accident and they cut the track down and lost his life just 1,000 feet. And
Scott Coletta.
Yeah, Scott Coletta, right. That would save him a lot of engine work. Well, I don't think it does anymore. I mean, they're still putting pieces in after only 1,000 feet. Things go bang.
They do, but I mean, the cars continue to go faster. We need those shutdown areas
Oh, yeah.
to slow those things down. The danger's still there. I don't think maintenance has been reduced at all.
Not lately it has, that's
Yeah.
for sure. I think it did when it first started, but not anymore. Because what they say, stab it and stir it. Make sure you keep it going straight.
That's right.
And I can remember when Tony went out of a track, and there was only one tree at this racetrack, and he hit it. And he went over the wall and hit the tree. I mean, he had to get outside the. I thought, how did you do that? He said, I took aim. I said, sure he did. Anyway, I appreciate you taking the time. As it worked out, you're going to be out of town when I had originally asked. And I guess they had to back up because the son is taking a big test tomorrow, so they couldn't come in tonight. And you were available. I appreciate you taking the time.
You.
And give everybody again the where to find your schedules.
Yep, you can just go to raceirp.com. Just put a Google, you can put it in Google and you'll find us as well. But RaceIRP is all of our social handles as well.
Well, hopefully, there'll be enough seats that maybe some of the races I'll be able to go out. There'll be room to.
We'll find a new spot.
I'm losing weight, so it'll make it a little bit easier to get in. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the job you and your team are doing. I think bringing some of these events in that nobody's heard of are really successful. And I hope Infinity comes back because they drew huge crowds. Good grief.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate, Don, you having me on, but I also appreciate the support that everybody continues to show for motorsports in central Indiana. I mean, it's pretty special that on a Tuesday night, you're out here talking racing, right? If we did this in Gainesville, Florida, people would look at us cross-eyed right now on a random Tuesday in February. So we're pretty fortunate. It's because of folks like everybody here that we get to do this. So thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. And of course, unfortunately for you, I do know how to get a hold of you.
Yes,
we'll
you
get
do.
you again.
Thanks, Don.
My guest, Kasey Kohler, General Manager, IRP. I want to mention to everybody, if anybody, when this goes online, is looking for tickets to this year's 500, I have 6 of them. They're in the paddock. They're down near the start-finish line. They're in rows G, G, and H, H, and they're seats 14, 15, and 16, and they're back to back to each other. So if anybody, and there's 135 facing, that's all they want for them. If you're interested, get a hold of me. I'll put you in touch with the owners. Be glad to help you. Till next time, which will be the 14th of March, we'll see you then. Come back again. Until then, Don Kasey saying thanks for being here. We'll see you again.